Welcome to the world of fractions. As we continue our learning, we have now reached a point in time that the majority of students are frowning. But I must tell you, there is no point in being frustrated because we have the faithful guru to help us through all of our problems. So we're going to start with multiplying fractions, and as always, for some of you this may be a review, and for some of you it may be completely new. So you want to make sure to take notes to go with this. So when we're multiplying fraction, the size of the parts change. We want to look at a basic multiplication problem and consider how we have been doing this and what it is that we're used to. So how much is 2 of 2? Well, how much is 2 times 2? Hopefully you guys have the opportunity to remember your multiplication facts, and we can use the same idea now to represent fractions. So how much is 1/2 of 1/2? A mathematical representation of that would allow us to represent it in numerous ways. First, we're going to use a fraction manipulative, and we're going to see what it is to have 1/2 of a circle. So to find 1/2 of 1/2, we must divide the half in half. And I know you guys are like, oh my god, this is way too complicated. There's too much halves going on. But as we proceed, hopefully it will make things a little bit easier for you. So once we divide the half in half, we can determine that this would actually equal 1/4. I don't think my line shows all the way through there on this PowerPoint, but there should be a line that goes all the way through the circle. So when we write this problem in mathematical terms, it looks like 1/2 times 1/2 equals 1/4. So now here is an example, you guys. This is just for the idea of visualizing what it is that we're actually doing, because fractions is something we'll be using in the real world very often. So you can take the sheet of paper you're writing notes on, or if it's in your notebook already and you don't want to use it, you can take a different sheet of paper, and we want to fold it in half horizontally. So what you should have now is a half of a sheet of paper. It should be smaller than your original sheet of paper by 1/2. And so what is the value of 1/2 of your sheet of paper? Trick question. Now what we want to do is fold the half that we have in half. And with this activity, now that we've folded it in half twice, we want to actually shade in the portion that can still be seen. You can do this with your pencil or a color, whatever you would like. So after you have finished shading, you want to open up your paper completely back to the original size that it was. It should look something like this. And you should have one section that is colored. So now consider the idea, what is the value of 1/2 of 1/2? What would be the numerical representation? One half of 1/2 is equal to 1/4. We saw this with the circle, and we saw it again now with your paper. So there are different ways that we can represent fractions, and we just want to keep that in mind when we are working with them, because oftentimes one way that works for you may not be the same way that works for your group. You guys all see things differently, and that's completely okay. In math terms, this will look at like 1/2 times 1/2 is equal to 1/4. So we have conquered what is 1/2 of 1/2 two separate ways, and we are actually going to continue it in another way. So the word of means to multiply. Hopefully you guys have a few words that you know what type of operations they're tied to now that we've completed the real number system and order of operations. But in case you forgot, the word of means to multiply. So 1/2 of 1/2 is equal to 1/2 times 1/2. If you'll realize, this is being really repetitive because it's something that is important that you guys acknowledge. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we are going to actually model it with an array model. So we have 1/2 times 1/2, and luckily for us, when we're dealing with multiplication, you only have to sketch one array. Yay! If you guys haven't worked with array multiplication yet, it's okay. This video will talk you through it, so there is no need to stress out. When we are multiplying fractions and we're talking about arrays, we want to sketch an array using the denominator. So that's a vocabulary word. If you do not know what that means, this would be a good time to maybe write a side note to yourself or highlight it. The denominator is the bottom part of the fraction. So we're going to sketch an array using the denominators, and we're going to shade the value of the first factor with some color. I'm just using green in this particular case. And then we're going to use diagonal lines to show the value of the second factor. This is pretty basic. You do want to use diagonal lines for the second one every time that you're doing this, because if you get a bunch of different colors going on, then they all smush together and it ends up not looking so nice. So finally, the product will be shown by the sections of the array that appear to have both types of shadings. This means that they will be shaded in whatever color you're using, as well as have some lines going through them. So we're back to the same problem we've been working on. 1/2 times 1/2. Taking a moment, quiz yourself, what number is the denominator? Well, as we discussed before, the denominators of the fraction are still the dimensions of your arrays, so hopefully you've discovered that the 2 in both equations is going to be the dimension of your array. What this means is that we are going to have 2 rows and 2 columns. So creating a 2 by 2 array should look just like this. Of course, if you have drawing skills like I do, there might be squiggly lines and it may not be as perfect as this nice computer animation. So now what we would like to do to represent the first fraction, we're going to shade in 1/2. So we are shading with green, and it didn't appear to be the same color. I'm not sure how that works out. So if you are talking about fractions, if you'll notice, we're shading in the first half of 1/2 in regards Now what we're going to do is use the lines, whatever type of lines you would like, to show the second fraction of 1/2. So now we're looking at the rows, not the columns, and we're going to shade 1/2. So as you'll see here, shading 1/2 of the rows, I just picked the top. You guys could have done the bottom, either way. And so as we learned when we were talking about how to properly use array methods, the product is the part that is double shaded, which is colored in lines. So looking at the big picture here, I want you guys to think about what is going to be the numerator and what is going to be the denominator of our new fraction. Hopefully with our multiple examples already, you guys have an idea of what it should be. And I'm sure you're correct, but 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4, because there's only one unit out of all 4 that is double shaded. which means that it is colored and lined. So here we have some examples, just a couple for you guys. At this point in time, if you feel comfortable and are ready to complete some of the activities for this level, then you are more than welcome to stop the video and move on to the next station. If you are still here, I'm assuming that means you need a little bit more practice. Do not worry, we're here to work through the examples. First, we have 1/2 times 1/3. So what we need to consider is, what are the denominators? And when we're considering this, I want you guys to know I am going to use the array method, so you will get another visual representation. And the denominators for this one are 2 and 3. The first one lets us know how many rows we are going to have. So we have 1/2. That tells us that we're going to have 2 rows. Rows go like this. And then we have 1/3. That is our denominator. So that tells us that we are going to have 3 columns. Columns are going up and down like the columns in a building. So now we have our array method. We want to go ahead and simply shade. So we're talking with rows first. 1/2, we're going to pick and shade. So I shaded the top half again. So we are shading 1/2. And we're multiplying it times 1/3. So we are only shading 1 of the 1/3. And as we do so, we will result in a double shaded area, which gives us our answer, 1/6. 1/2 times 1/3 is equal to 1/6. Another example we have here is 1/3 times 3/4. So we're doing rows times columns. So 1/3, 3 is our denominator. That's going to give us 3 rows, times 3/4. That's going to give us our columns. As we write the verbal representation here, you can easily see the rows are going horizontally and the columns are vertically. Taking the same idea of what we've been working with, we are going to shade 1/3 of these first. And now it says that we have times 3/4. So we are actually going to shade 3 of the fourths. So we have a new denominator, and our double shaded area is 3, so our numerator is going to be 3. So we have 3/12 as the answer. When simplified, this is equal to 1/4. We always want to make sure to take our final answer in the simplest form. Okay guys, that is everything for multiplying fractions. Prepare yourself for the next station and have an awesome day.